My supervisor promoted my lazy teammate instead of me. Then he saw what I attached to my resignation letter. The conference room felt smaller than usual that Thursday morning. Maybe it was the anticipation hanging in the air, or maybe it was because I just knew, today would finally validate 3 years of sacrifice. Thanks for joining me, team. Mark Roberts, our department supervisor, stood at the head of the table, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. As you all know, we've been considering candidates for the senior project manager position, and I'm excited to announce we've made our decision. My hands felt clammy as I gripped the edge of the table. 3 years. 3 years of canceled weekend plans, of taking calls during my sister's wedding, of stepping in to save projects when others dropped the ball. Specifically, when Daniel dropped the ball, which happened with alarming frequency. Mark cleared his throat. This wasn't an easy decision, but we're confident we've chosen someone who embodies leadership qualities and strategic thinking that will take our team to the next level. His gaze swept across the room, deliberately avoiding mine. That was my first warning. So please join me in congratulating our newest senior project manager, Daniel Conway. The world didn't exactly stop spinning, but it certainly tilted on its axis. Across the table, Daniel's face broke into a smile, not one of surprise, but of entitlement, as if he'd expected this all along. Around me, colleagues clapped politely, a few stealing glances my way. They knew. Everyone knew. Congratulations, man, someone said. Well deserved, added another, their voice strained with the effort of sounding convincing. I sat frozen, a plastic smile pasted on my face, as Daniel stood to shake Mark's hand. My mind raced through a highlight reel of the past year, staying until midnight to fix Daniel's botched client presentation, quietly adding missing elements to his reports while he took long lunches, watching him schmooze with executives while I delivered results that kept our department afloat. Olivia? Mark's voice cut through my thoughts. Don't you have something to say to Daniel? Everyone turned to me, including Daniel, who had the audacity to look expectant, as if my blessing was the final seal of approval he needed. Congratulations, I managed, the word acid on my tongue. Quite an achievement. The meeting dissolved into casual chatter as people filed out. I remained seated, gathering my composure, until only Mark and I remained in the conference room. Something on your mind, Olivia? He asked, shuffling papers into his leather portfolio. I stood slowly. You know there is. Mark sighed, as if my reaction was both expected and tiresome. Look, I know you wanted this position. I didn't just want it, Mark. I earned it. My voice remained level despite the storm brewing inside me. My projects have the highest client satisfaction ratings in the department. I've brought in 4 new accounts this year alone. I've trained new hires, covered for absences, and never once missed a deadline. He leaned against the table, arms crossed. And those are all excellent qualities. You're an exceptional worker, Olivia, the best executor on the team. Then why? But leadership isn't just about execution. Daniel has vision. He connects with upper management. He sees the big picture while he paused, searching for words. You're fantastic with the details. My jaw tightened. The details? You mean the actual work? The deliverables that keep our clients paying? Mark's expression shifted to something patronizing. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're taking this personally when it's a business decision. Daniel has leadership potential. You're great at execution. Not everyone is cut out for management. Those words landed like a physical blow. 3 years of dedication reduced to good at details, while Daniel, who regularly disappeared for 2-hour lunches and submitted half-finished work, was deemed leadership material. I see, I said quietly. And it has nothing to do with your weekly golf games with Daniel? Or the fact that you both went to Cornell? Mark's smile disappeared. I'd be careful with accusations like that, Olivia. It's not a good look. Neither is blatant favoritism, but that didn't stop you. His eyes narrowed. I think you need to cool off. Take the rest of the day if you need to. But when you come back, I expect professionalism. Daniel is your superior now, and part of being a team player is accepting decisions even when they don't go your way. I stared at him for a long moment. Of course, I finally said, my voice hollow. Professionalism above all. The elevator ride down to the parking garage was a blur. I nodded mechanically at colleagues who didn't notice the cracks spreading through my professional veneer. In my car, I sat in silence for 10 full minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. 3 years. 3 years of being the first in and last out. Of taking on the difficult clients no one else wanted to handle. Of building relationships that brought in new business. All while Daniel coasted by on charm and connections, leaving others, leaving me, to clean up his messes. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. Crying wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't erase the smirk on Mark's face when he dismissed my contributions. It wouldn't undo the humiliation of watching Daniel accept a promotion he hadn't earned. I started my car and pulled out of the parking garage, driving aimlessly through afternoon traffic. Rain began to fall, matching my mood perfectly. At a red light, I checked my phone to find 3 messages from coworkers, expressions of shock, sympathy, outrage on my behalf. Everyone knows you deserved it. Everyone except the person making the decision. By the time I reached my apartment, something had shifted inside me. The initial shock and hurt had crystallized into something harder, something that burned with clarity. I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of wine, not bothering to change out of my work clothes. Opening my laptop, I began to type. Not a resignation letter, not yet. Instead, I created a new folder titled simply Evidence. Into it went screenshots of emails, copies of reports, calendar invites showing missed meetings, and client feedback forms. All of it painting a clear picture of Daniel's mediocrity and my consistent excellence. That night, instead of crying myself to sleep, I began planning. This wasn't just about a missed promotion anymore. This was about justice. And I was just getting started. I came into the office the next morning with purpose and wore my most professional outfit, a navy blue pantsuit that made me feel armored. As I settled at my desk, Daniel strolled in 20 minutes late, carrying a new nameplate for his office. His office. The one that should have been mine. "Morning, Olivia," he called out cheerfully. "Hey, I could use your help transitioning some of my old projects. So I can focus on the new responsibilities." I smiled tightly. "Of course, Daniel. Whatever you need." He beamed, oblivious to the ice in my voice. "Great. I'll email you the details." As he walked away, I opened my evidence folder. Time to get methodical. For the next week, I maintained a perfect facade. I congratulated Daniel in public, assisted him when asked, and never once let my mask slip. Meanwhile, I spent every evening expanding my report. What had started as simple frustration was evolving into something far more damning. The first red flag appeared when I reviewed Daniel's project history. The completion dates didn't match my records. According to official documentation, he had delivered the Westfield proposal 2 days before the deadline, but I distinctly remembered finishing it myself after he left early for a family emergency. His 4th that month. I dug deeper, pulling up email timestamps and revision histories. There it was. I had submitted the final document at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday, while Daniel's submission was timestamped for the following Tuesday, coincidentally, just before Mark's weekly report to upper management. This wasn't just taking credit. Someone had altered the records. My hands trembled slightly as I created a new spreadsheet. In one column, I listed official project completion dates. In another, I documented the actual timelines with supporting evidence, emails, meeting recordings, and even witness statements from trusted colleagues who were willing to go on record. "What are you still doing here?" Lisa from accounting asked, poking her head into my cubicle around 8 p.m. one evening. I thought I was the only workaholic left. I minimized my screen, just catching up on some things. She leaned against the doorframe. What happened with that promotion was bull. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone except HR, I said wryly. Well, she glanced around before lowering her voice. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I processed the performance bonuses. Last quarter, Daniel's numbers were adjusted. Significantly. My heart raced. Adjusted by whom? The approval code was Mark's. She straightened up. Just thought you should know. Some of us still believe in fairness around here. After she left, I sat in stunned silence. This was bigger than favoritism. This was systematic manipulation. The next morning, I requested access to the shared drive containing all client feedback forms, citing a quality assurance review as my reason. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Several negative comments about Daniel had disappeared from the official records, while glowing reviews were prominently featured. In one case, a client had explicitly written, "Daniel was unprepared and dismissive. Olivia salvaged the meeting and is the only reason we're continuing this contract." In the filed version, this had been shortened to, "Team performed adequately. Contract renewed." By week 2 of my investigation, my apartment walls were covered with sticky notes and printouts. I'd created a timeline that showed not just Daniel's incompetence, but Mark's deliberate cover-up. Financial reports had been massaged. Client communications had been edited. Performance reviews had been selectively presented to management. It wasn't just a case of an undeserving promotion. It was fraud. On Friday night, 3 weeks after the announcement that had shattered my professional world, I sat down to compile everything into a cohesive report. I organized the evidence chronologically, highlighting the most egregious examples of manipulation. I included testimonials from 5 colleagues, carefully anonymized to protect them. I added financial projections showing how Daniel's mismanagement had already cost the company over $200,000 in billable hours and would likely lead to the loss of at least 2 major accounts. The final document ran to 37 pages. Professional, factual, and utterly damning. I titled it simply, "Systemic Manipulation of Performance Metrics and Client Relations, a 3-year analysis." Then I opened a new document and began typing my resignation letter. It was brief, professional, and gave the standard 2 weeks' notice. No accusations, no emotions. Just a simple statement of departure. The real bombshell would be the attachment. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, my closest friend at the company. "You coming to Daniel's celebration dinner tonight? Mark's taking the whole team to Carlucci's." I hadn't been invited. "Of course. Can't make it," I replied. "Working on something important. Your loss. Open bar. Don't work too hard. It's Friday." I put my phone down and returned to my letter. The cursor blinked at me after my signature line, seeming to ask, "Are you sure about this?" Was I? This could easily backfire. I might be labeled a troublemaker, a disgruntled employee lashing out after being passed over. Mark had connections in the industry. He could make sure I never got another job in this field. But then I remembered his smirk when he told me I was just good at execution. I remembered the countless nights I'd stayed late to fix Daniel's mistakes. I remembered every time I'd watch someone less qualified advance because they played the game better than I did. Not this time. I saved both documents and closed my laptop. Tomorrow, I would make a decision about how to proceed. Tonight, I needed clarity. Grabbing my coat, I headed out for a long walk. The evening air was crisp, carrying the first hints of autumn. As I walked, I mentally rehearsed different scenarios. Send the report to HR? They reported to Mark. Leak it anonymously? Too unprofessional. Confront Mark directly? He'd deny everything. I needed someone with real power. Someone who couldn't be ignored. By the time I returned home, I knew exactly what I had to do and who needed to see my report. It was risky, potentially career-ending if it backfired. But sometimes, the only way to fix a corrupt system was to burn it down and start over. Monday morning arrived with a sudden downpour that matched my mood perfectly. Intense, unstoppable, and clearing the air. I arrived at the office an hour early, before most of my colleagues would trickle in. The quiet gave me space to think, to doubt, to recommit. My resignation letter and report sat ready in my email drafts, waiting for the final click. All weekend, I'd wavered between resolution and uncertainty. Was I overreacting? Would anyone even care about the evidence I'd gathered? I sipped my coffee and pulled up the company directory on my computer. My finger hovered over Mark's name as I considered my options one last time. Then, almost on impulse, I scrolled up to the executive leadership. Eleanor Carter, CEO. I'd met her exactly once, during the company's annual holiday party last December. She had been making rounds, speaking briefly with each department. When she reached our group, Mark had immediately stepped forward, positioning himself as our spokesperson. But Eleanor had sidestepped him, asking each of us about our roles directly. "And you are?" she'd asked me, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Olivia Chun. I manage the Westfield and Terranova accounts," I'd replied. "Ah, yes. Terranova. They almost left us last year, didn't they?" Her eyes had narrowed slightly, but something or someone changed their mind. That was excellent work. I remembered being surprised that she knew about that particular save. It hadn't been widely publicized, and I'd received no formal recognition for it. "Thank you," I'd said. "It was challenging, but they're one of our most valuable clients." She had nodded, seemingly pleased with my answer. "People like you keep this company running, Olivia." Then she'd moved on, leaving me wondering if she meant anything by the comment. Now, staring at her name in the directory, I remembered something else about Eleanor Carter. Office gossip painted her as ruthlessly fair, someone who despised office politics and valued results above all else. People said she had climbed from entry-level to CEO by consistently outperforming her peers, refusing to play games along the way. Before I could second-guess myself, I added her email address to the recipient field. HR would get a copy, as protocol demanded. Mark would get one too. I wasn't going to blindside him completely. But Eleanor Carter would see exactly what had been happening in her company. My hand trembled slightly as I attached my 37-page report to the email. The subject line read simply, "Letter of Resignation and accompanying documentation." The email itself was brief. "Dear Ms. Carter, Mr. Roberts, and Human Resources, please accept this letter as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as project manager with Briarwood Solutions, effective 2 weeks from today, May 15th. The attached report details my reasons for departure and contains information I believe is relevant to the company's ongoing operations and integrity. I remain available to assist with the transition of my responsibilities during my notice period. Sincerely, Olivia Chun." Simple, professional, and attached to it, a corporate bombshell. I took a deep breath and pressed send before I could change my mind. The confirmation appeared on my screen. "Your message has been sent." There was no taking it back now. For the next hour, I methodically organized my desk and digital files, preparing for the transition I had offered in my email. The office gradually filled with Monday morning chatter, colleagues complaining about weekend traffic and sharing anecdotes about their days off. Daniel arrived at 9:45, sauntering toward his new office with a cardboard box of personal items. He caught my eye and gave a little wave, as if we were the best of friends. I nodded back, wondering how he would react when the truth came out. At 10:30, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Not from Eleanor, not from HR, from Mark. "My office. Now." 2 words that confirmed he'd seen my resignation. I stood, smoothed my skirt, and walked calmly to his office, aware of curious glances following me. Office gossip traveled fast. People knew something was happening. Mark was standing behind his desk when I entered, his face flushed with anger. He didn't invite me to sit. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, jabbing a finger at his computer screen. "My resignation letter," I replied evenly, as is customary when leaving a position. "Don't play dumb, Olivia. You copied the CEO on this. And what is this report you've attached? 37 pages? Are you insane?" I maintained my composure. The report speaks for itself. I felt it was important to document certain irregularities I've observed. Irregularities. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're talking about being passed over for a promotion. Get over yourself." "Actually, I'm talking about systematically altered records, manipulated client feedback, and financial misrepresentation, among other things." The color drained from his face slightly. "You have no idea what you're talking about. And sending this nonsense to Eleanor Carter? She won't even read it. Do you know how many emails she gets in a day?" As if on cue, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting another angry message from Mark. Instead, I saw an email notification that made my heart skip a beat. From eleanor.carter@briarwoodsolutions.com. Subject: letter of resignation and accompanying documentation. Mark noticed my expression change.
"What is it?" he demanded.
I turned the screen toward him, watched his eyes widen as he read the first line of the preview. "Meet me in my office. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring your report." Mark's face went from flushed to ashen in seconds. "You can't be serious." He stopped himself, visibly trying to regain control. "This is a mistake. A huge mistake that's going to cost you your career." His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "You need to write back right now and tell her you made a mistake. That you are emotional and the report contains false information. That you're withdrawing it entirely." I met his gaze steadily. "I don't think I'll be doing that. You don't understand what you're doing, Olivia. I have friends in every major firm in this city. By the time I'm done, you won't be able to get a job sorting mail." It was a desperate threat from a man who suddenly realized he might be in serious trouble. I almost pitied him. "I guess we'll see what Ms. Carter has to say tomorrow," I replied, turning to leave. "This isn't over," he called after me. "You'll regret this, I promise you." I closed his door behind me, heart pounding but head high. The die was cast. Tomorrow morning would change everything. Sleep eluded me that night. I rehearsed what I would say to Eleanor Carter, anticipating her questions, preparing my responses. By morning, dark circles shadowed my eyes, but adrenaline kept me sharp. I arrived at the office 45 minutes early, clutching a leather portfolio containing a printed copy of my report, complete with highlighted sections and tabbed pages. The executive floor, the 20th, was territory I'd rarely visited. Unlike our cramped 14th floor with its maze of cubicles, the 20th featured wide hallways, abstract art, and actual silence. "Miss Chen." A poised woman at the reception desk greeted me. "Miss Carter is expecting you. Would you like coffee before you go in?" "No, thank you," I replied, my mouth too dry for anything. She led me down a hallway to a corner office with glass walls that offered panoramic views of the city. Through the glass, I could see Eleanor Carter at her desk, reviewing documents with such intensity that she didn't notice our approach. "Olivia Chen is here," the receptionist announced after a gentle knock. Eleanor looked up, her expression unreadable.
"Thank you, Diane.
Please hold all calls." I stepped into the office, immediately struck by its understated elegance. No ostentatious displays of wealth or achievement, just clean lines, functional furniture, and a single framed photograph of what appeared to be Eleanor with an elderly couple, presumably her parents. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. I perched on the edge, placing my portfolio on my lap. "I've read your report," she began without preamble. "Twice, actually." My heart skipped. She hadn't just skimmed it. She'd read it thoroughly. "Before we discuss the contents, I want to understand something," Eleanor continued, studying me intently. "Why resign? Why not bring these concerns to HR or to me directly, without quitting?" It was a fair question, and one I'd anticipated. "I considered that option," I replied carefully. "But given the nature of what I discovered, I was concerned about potential retaliation. And frankly, I wasn't sure anyone would believe me over Mark. He's been with the company for 12 years. I've been here 3. She nodded slowly. "And yet you included evidence that potentially implicates yourself in covering for Daniel's incompetence. That took courage or desperation?" "Perhaps both," I admitted. "I should have spoken up sooner about the issues with his work. That's on me." A hint of approval flickered across her face. "Well, let's discuss what you've uncovered." She turned to her laptop, tapped a few keys, and swiveled the screen so I could see it. "I've been doing some investigating of my own since I received your email." On the screen was our company's project management system, but with administrative access levels I'd never seen before. Eleanor navigated to a section labeled Edit History. "Your report claimed that project completion dates had been altered retrospectively. Look here." She pointed to a log that showed username M. Roberts making changes to completion dates on 7 different projects, all assigned to Daniel. And here, she continued, pulling up another screen, are the original client feedback forms you mentioned. She scrolled through comments that matched my recollection precisely, scathing critiques of Daniel's performance that had mysteriously softened in the official records. The most concerning, however, is this. She clicked to another tab showing financial projections. According to your report, Daniel's mismanagement of the Axiom account cost us approximately $140,000 in billable hours. My financial team ran the numbers independently last night. The actual figure is closer to $215,000. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. What's remarkable is not just the fraud itself, but how long it continued undetected. Our systems have checks and balances specifically designed to prevent this kind of manipulation. Mark has administrator privileges, I explained. And he's friendly with Jerry in IT, who implemented the current system. Yes, I'm aware of their connection now. Eleanor's tone had cooled considerably. Jerry will be having his own conversation with HR this afternoon. She stood suddenly, walking to the window. For a moment, she gazed out at the city, hands clasped behind her back. You know, Olivia, when I became CEO 5 years ago, I vowed to create a culture of meritocracy here. A place where results mattered more than relationships. She turned back to face me. Clearly, I've failed in that mission. I wouldn't say. I began, but she cut me off with a raised hand. No, it's important to acknowledge failure when it occurs. The question is what we do next. She returned to her desk and pressed her intercom. Diane, please ask Mr. Liu from legal and Ms. Patel from HR to join us immediately. My pulse quickened. This was really happening. Within minutes, 2 people I recognized as senior executives entered the office. Eleanor didn't waste time on pleasantries. Raj, David, I need immediate action on a serious matter. I'm sending you both a report compiled by Ms. Chen here, along with my own verification of its contents. I want Mark Roberts and Daniel Conway escorted from the building today. Full security protocol, complete systems lockout, and standard NDA enforcement. They looked startled but nodded professionally. Should we prepare a statement for the department? Ms. Patel asked. Yes, but keep it factual and brief. No details that could compromise any legal action we might take. Eleanor turned to me. Which brings me to my next question, Olivia. What would you like to happen now? I blinked, caught off guard. I'm not sure I understand. Your resignation. In light of these revelations, would you consider withdrawing it? The question hung in the air between us. After weeks of feeling powerless, I suddenly had choices, real ones. But before I could answer, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Through the glass walls, I saw Mark being led toward the elevators by security, his face contorted with rage. Our eyes met for a brief, electric moment. In that instant, I knew my world had irrevocably changed. Eleanor followed my gaze. It seems events are moving quickly, she remarked. So, Olivia, what will it be? Stay or go? I need time to think about it, I told Eleanor, surprising even myself with my response. 3 days ago, I would have jumped at any chance to stay. Now, I wasn't so sure. Eleanor nodded, seeming to respect my hesitation. Of course. Take the week to consider. In the meantime, I'd like you to work directly with our executive team on the transition. Your department will need stability during this adjustment period. As I left her office, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Mark and Daniel gone. Just like that. The 2 men who had made my professional life miserable for months were being escorted from the building while I was being courted by the CEO herself. The elevator ride back to the 14th floor felt surreal. When the doors opened, I stepped into chaos. Colleagues huddled in small groups, whispering frantically. All conversations stopped when they saw me. Rachel rushed over, eyes wide. Olivia, what happened? Security just took Mark and Daniel. People are saying they were fired on the spot. Before I could answer, Ms. Patel from HR appeared at the entrance to our department. She called for everyone's attention and delivered a brief, carefully worded statement. Due to evidence of professional misconduct, Mark Roberts and Daniel Conway were no longer with the company. An interim manager would be appointed while a formal search was conducted. All client relationships would continue without disruption. The moment she finished and left, the room erupted into speculation. Professional misconduct? What does that even mean? I heard Mark was cooking the books. No way. It's probably harassment or something. Did you see Daniel's face when they took his badge? He looked like he was going to be sick. Throughout it all, eyes kept darting my way. They knew I was connected to this somehow, but no one dared ask directly. No one except Rachel, who cornered me at my desk. "It was you, wasn't it?" she whispered. "You're the reason they're gone." I met her gaze steadily. I submitted evidence of serious misconduct. The rest was Eleanor Carter's decision. Holy shit. Rachel looked at me with newfound respect. "I always knew you were tough, but this is legendary." By lunchtime, the story had grown to mythic proportions. According to office gossip, I had single-handedly exposed a massive fraud ring that reached the highest levels of the company. People who had barely acknowledged my existence for years suddenly found reasons to stop by my desk, offering congratulations or fishing for details. Is it true Mark was embezzling? Did Daniel really fabricate client reports? Are you taking Mark's position now? I deflected each question with a practiced response. I'm not at liberty to discuss the details. At 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You've made a terrible mistake. I hope you're ready for what comes next." So Mark had found a way to contact me despite the security lockout. I forwarded the message to Ms. Patel immediately, adding it to the growing file of evidence against him. By 4 p.m., an email went out announcing that Janice Wong, a respected senior manager from another division, would serve as our interim department head. The email also mentioned that all of Daniel's clients would be redistributed and his projects thoroughly audited. As I prepared to leave for the day, my desk phone rang. It was Eleanor's assistant. "Ms. Carter would like you to join a call with Terranova at 9 a.m. tomorrow," she informed me. "Their CEO heard about today's changes and specifically requested your presence on the call." Terranova, our second largest client, and one that Daniel had nearly lost through neglect before I intervened. Now they wanted me directly involved. It wasn't just validation, it was vindication. Walking to my car that evening felt different. People from other departments nodded in recognition as I passed. A vice president I'd never spoken to held the elevator for me and mentioned he'd heard good things. Word had spread beyond our floor, beyond our building. At home, I dropped my bag and collapsed onto my couch, physically and emotionally drained. My phone had been buzzing nonstop with messages from colleagues and even former coworkers who had somehow caught wind of the day's events. I ignored them all and called my sister instead. "So," she asked immediately, having been my confidant throughout this ordeal. "What happened?" "They're gone," I said simply. "Both of them. Escorted out by security." "Oh my God," she breathed. "And your job?" "Eleanor wants me to stay. She's giving me the week to decide." "Decide? What's there to decide? This is everything you wanted."
Was it though?
I stared at the ceiling, considering. I don't know if I want to stay in a place where this could happen in the first place. "But you fixed it," my sister insisted. "You exposed the corruption." This time, I agreed. But what about next time? What about all the other Marks and Daniels in the company who haven't been caught yet? The truth was, something fundamental had shifted inside me. The victory felt hollow somehow. Not because Mark and Daniel didn't deserve their fate. They absolutely did, but because I had glimpsed the ugly machinery behind the corporate facade. The favoritism, the protection of the mediocre at the expense of the excellent. Later that night, my email pinged with a notification that made me sit up straight. It was a message from Larson and Mitchell, the industry-leading firm I had interviewed with 6 months earlier but hadn't heard back from. "Dear Ms. Chun, in light of recent developments, we would like to revisit our previous conversations about a potential role for you at Larson and Mitchell. Our CEO, Thomas Larson, would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you at your earliest convenience. The leadership qualities you've demonstrated align perfectly with our company values. Please let me know when you might be available for a call. Best regards, Jennifer Atkins, VP of Talent Acquisition." I read the email 3 times, my mind racing. How had they heard so quickly? Then I remembered Eleanor Carter and Thomas Larson sat on a nonprofit board together. The news had traveled through executive channels. For the first time in weeks, I smiled genuinely. The game had changed, and suddenly I held all the cards. The following day felt like navigating an alternate reality. When I stepped off the elevator onto our floor, conversations paused momentarily before resuming with increased energy. Janice Wong, our interim department head, had already taken over Mark's office, its door propped open in stark contrast to his closed-door policy. "Olivia," she called when she spotted me. "Got a minute?" Inside Mark's former domain, all traces of him had vanished. No golf trophies, no Cornell pennant, no framed photos of him shaking hands with clients. "I wanted to thank you," Janice said, gesturing for me to sit. "What you did took immense courage." "I just documented what was happening," I replied modestly. "No." Her tone was firm. "You stood up when others wouldn't. Do you know how many people suspected something wasn't right but said nothing? Including me." She looked slightly ashamed at the admission. We all saw the favoritism, but no one had the guts to challenge it. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a reminder. The Terra Nova call with Eleanor was in 15 minutes. The call exceeded all expectations. Terra Nova's CEO, Victor Menendez, didn't just want to maintain their contract. He wanted to expand it. "Now that we'll be working directly with you, Olivia, we're confident our partnership can grow significantly." Eleanor, who had joined a call from her office, raised an eyebrow at me as if to say, "See what you're worth?" By mid-afternoon, word had spread that 3 more clients had specifically requested me as their point of contact. My inbox overflowed with meeting invitations and congratulatory messages. Even Jerry from IT, who had been questioned but ultimately cleared of deliberate involvement in Mark's schemes, sent a sheepish email thanking me for cleaning house. At 3 p.m., Eleanor's assistant called again. "Ms. Carter would like to see you at 4. When I arrived at her office, she wasn't alone. Beside her sat an austere man in his 60s whom I recognized from company events as Richard Briarwood, the founder and chairman of the board. "Olivia," Eleanor greeted me warmly. "I believe you know Richard." He stood to shake my hand. "Ms. Chun, your actions have done this company a great service." The meeting that followed was nothing short of surreal. Richard explained that an emergency board meeting had been called after Eleanor presented my findings. The board had authorized a complete audit of all departments to check for similar irregularities. "We've also unanimously approved a significant restructuring," he continued. "Eleanor has convinced us that our middle management layer has grown too insular. Too many Marks protecting too many Daniels. Eleanor took over. Which brings us to you, Olivia. I mentioned you were considering your options. Before you decide, we'd like to make you an offer." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a job description, Director of Operations Excellence, reporting directly to Eleanor herself. The salary figure at the bottom made me blink twice to ensure I wasn't misreading it. "This is a new position," Eleanor explained. "You'd be responsible for implementing performance metrics and accountability systems across all departments. Essentially, making sure what happened in your department never happens again anywhere in the company." It was a stunning offer, a massive promotion, a seat at the executive table, and the chance to reshape company culture from within. "I'm flattered," I said sincerely. "But I have another offer to consider as well." If Eleanor was surprised, she didn't show it. "Larson and Mitchell," she stated rather than asked. "Thomas called me this morning. He was quite persistent about your qualifications." I nodded, impressed by her transparency. "Well," Richard interjected, "it seems you have a decision to make, Miss Chen." That evening, I met with Thomas Larson himself at an upscale restaurant downtown. The offer he presented was equally impressive: Senior Vice President of Client Relations, overseeing their entire East Coast portfolio. "We've been watching your career for some time," he admitted. "Your handling of the Terra Nova account particularly caught our attention. And now, after what happened at Briarwood." He smiled appreciatively. "Let's just say you've demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity we value." By Friday morning, I had 2 exceptional offers in hand, both with influence, prestige, and compensation far beyond what I'd imagined possible a week earlier. The decision weighed heavily as I drove to Briarwood for what might be one of my final days there. My morning was interrupted by an unexpected visitor to my cubicle, Lisa from accounting, who had first tipped me off about the altered bonuses. "Have you seen this?" she asked, placing a printout on my desk. It was an industry blog post titled, "Corporate Whistleblower Exposes Fraud at Briarwood Solutions." The article was light on specifics, but heavy on speculation, claiming that a senior employee had exposed years of financial manipulation. "It's all over LinkedIn too," Lisa continued. "You're trending in industry circles." The news was both flattering and alarming. I hadn't sought public recognition for what I'd done. By lunchtime, I'd made my decision. I requested a private meeting with Eleanor for 4 p.m., my last official act at Briarwood Solutions. When I entered her office, she studied my expression and nodded slightly, seeming to read my decision before I spoke it. "You're going to Larson and Mitchell," she stated. "Yes," I confirmed. "It's not about the money or title. I just need a fresh start." She didn't try to persuade me otherwise. "I understand, and I respect your decision." She stood, extending her hand. "Briarwood's loss is their gain. But remember, Olivia, you've set something in motion here that won't stop with your departure. Your legacy will continue." As I turned to leave, she added one final thought. "Smart move, Olivia. Never let people like them win." The following Monday, I walked into Larson and Mitchell's gleaming headquarters as their newest senior vice president. My office overlooked the city skyline, with a nameplate that bore my name and a title I had earned through grit and integrity rather than connections. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "First day at the new job. How does it feel to be a corporate badass?" I smiled, glancing at the newspaper on my desk. A small article in the business section noted that Briarwood Solutions had announced a comprehensive restructuring following the departure of several executives. The company's stock had risen 3 points on the news. "It feels like justice," I replied. "And it feels like a beginning." I placed my resignation letter, the one that had changed everything, in a frame on my credenza, not as a reminder of what I had lost, but of what I had gained. My voice, my power, and most importantly, my worth. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't just success, it's success on your own terms.